And with images like this, I think the culture was ripe for all manner of complex fantasies in those convents. And the more I learned about women's lives, the more I learned that actually they were hovering on the edge of a form of sensory deprivation. They go to 8 services a day. One of them is in the middle of the night. Matins is now at 5 o'clock in the morning. When they are praying, it is at 2 o'clock in the morning. They get up at 2 during that deepest part of the circadian rhythm of sleep, and they go into the chapel. It is cold. There is no light apart from candles. Their life is filled with this, and they are being encouraged for large periods of their life to fast, to go without food. There is now a very lively debate, once again, new historiography, about what we mean by holy anorexia. What happens to the female body, it happens to everybody, but it is particularly true with the female body, when it goes without food for a very long period of time. If you study the biochemistry of anorexia, you'll discover that voices appear to people who do not have enough nutrition in their body. When you hear of stories of visitations, of visions, you'll hear people describing a scent that's in the room when you go in. I was once giving a lecture in Canada, and a young doctor came up to me afterwards and said, that's so interesting, because we're told there's a diagnosis tool. If you go in and there's a young woman or an older woman who looks very thin, and there's a sweet, sickly scent in the room, it might be anorexia, because the organs are starting to consume themselves, or it might be undiagnosed diabetes, which may cause sudden coma or whatever. Now, it's not my job to tell you that's what was going on in these convents, because I don't think it's as simple as that. I actually think these women were having extraordinary, potentially ecstatic, powerful, creative relationships with a figure which grew out of these into their imagination. And I think it nurtured them and gave them power. Let's stay with that for a minute, and gave them power. Because, of course, if you could prove yourself a visionary during this period of time, you moved your head above the riffraff to become the visionary that the convent had. And that brought you benefices and money. So it gave them power. So just to return to her, finally, although I don't think it would have looked quite like this, I do think that something extraordinary was happening in some of the lives of these women. And it could not have been written about by a novelist until, if you like, this moment, 30, 35 years on from the impact that feminism has had on history, in order to create her story, in order to create a past which makes sense of our present and which gives us the greatest diving board for the future, while understanding, to return to the point I first made, that it's not easy, and if we just all assume we will succeed, then the richness of failure and conflict will not be there to kind of leaven the bread. Thank you very much.
So fabulous. One of the things about the archive and this weekend is the interweaving of the personal and creative life to produce the masterpiece. And we're very grateful to you for giving us a privileged insight into that moment with your daughters in Florence, and then for outlining all that followed. We're used to novelists giving us their personal insights, their sensitivity, their imagination. But to join that to the understanding of the historian and the broad sweep of history, and to show us how individual lives are wonderful both for themselves but also as keys to historical understanding, is something that will enable us to enjoy everything you write doubly when we come back to it. So thank you again, and a small token of our appreciation.
Oh my goodness.